What if I told you that the most powerful people in history didn't use money, armies, or intelligence to rule? They used something far more effective: fear. Fear is the most primal emotion. It overrides logic, paralyzes thought, and makes people obedient without question. It has shaped empires, crushed revolutions, and turned ordinary men into willing slaves of the system. But here's the real question. Are you being controlled by fear right now, without even realizing it? Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a weapon. It triggers the brain's fight or flight response, forcing people to react without thinking. Throughout history, rulers, dictators, and elites have mastered the science of fear manipulation. They understood one terrifying truth: a fearful population never questions authority. A scared mind will obey, even against its own interest, and the one who controls fear controls the world. But fear isn't just used in dictatorships. It's hidden everywhere, in our schools, media, politics, and daily lives. It is the invisible chain that keeps modern society in check. From childhood, we are taught what to fear and what to believe. Fear of failure, so you stay in line and never take risks. Fear of rejection, so you conform and never question the crowd. Fear of punishment, so you obey even when you shouldn't. Every major system of control, governments, religions, corporations, and media, has relied on fear to maintain power. The reason is simple. A society that fears something greater than itself will always surrender its freedom for protection. And here's the darkest part. Once fear has been implanted into the human mind, it no longer requires an oppressor. People will enforce their own chains. They will police each other, making sure no one steps out of line. This is how fear controls you, without you even realizing it. But this is just the beginning. Because every major empire, ruler, and system of power has used specific fear tactics to keep people weak, submissive, and afraid. The question is, are you brave enough to see how deep this goes? Because once you learn the truth about how fear has ruled the world, you can never unsee it. If fear is the ultimate weapon, then history's greatest rulers were its greatest masters. From the pharaohs of Egypt to the emperors of Rome, the world's most dominant civilizations weren't built on democracy, kindness, or fairness. They were built on absolute terror. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs weren't just kings, they were gods. They convinced millions that disobedience wasn't just treason, it was blasphemy. If you questioned the pharaoh, you weren't just a criminal, you were an enemy of the gods. If you disobeyed the state, you weren't just punished, you were eternally cursed. And if you tried to rebel, you were erased from history, your name chiseled out of stone. This wasn't just political control, it was spiritual and psychological warfare. By making people fear the wrath of divine punishment, pharaohs didn't need armies to enforce their rule. The people did it to themselves. Rome, the greatest empire of the ancient world, wasn't just powerful because of its armies. It was powerful because it turned fear into entertainment. In the Colosseum, thousands of people watched as prisoners, rebels, and criminals were thrown to lions as a warning to anyone who challenged Rome, crucified along roads to remind people what happens to traitors, executed in front of cheering crowds, so fear became a public spectacle. This was psychological warfare at its finest. The more Rome showed its power, the less anyone dared to challenge it. And when rebellion did rise, Rome responded with merciless destruction. Entire cities were burned to the ground just to send a message: disobey Rome, and you will be wiped from existence. Do you know why fear-based rule worked? Because every empire, from Egypt to Rome, understood. One thing, people don't need to love their rulers, they only need to fear them. A fearful society doesn't fight back. A fearful population doesn't rebel. A fearful mind will obey, even against its own best interest. And while we like to believe we've outgrown this form of control, what if I told you modern governments use the exact same tactics today? just with new technology. They don't need lions. They have media. They don't need coliseums. They have social media outrage. They don't need crucifixions. They have cancel culture, economic punishment, and digital blacklists. The methods have changed, but the strategy remains the same because fear has never stopped ruling the world. It has only evolved, and in the next act, we'll expose exactly how modern governments use the psychology of fear to control you without you even realizing it. What? If I told you that your greatest fears aren't even yours? What if they were carefully implanted into your mind, not by nature, not by experience, but by design? Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a weapon, and the most powerful rulers don't control you physically. It is the foundation of control. How modern governments use fear to maintain power. Fear of crime. The news doesn't report safety, it reports danger. They show crimes, terrorist threats, and mass shootings every single day. Why? Because a society in fear demands more control, more surveillance, and more laws. People who feel safe don't beg for protection, but people who are afraid, they will willingly give up their freedoms for the illusion of security. Fear of financial ruin. The constant fear of job loss, debt, and inflation keeps people in line. If people are financially unstable, they're too busy surviving to rebel. If people fear losing their livelihood, they won't question authority. This is why the system never teaches you financial independence. Dependent population is a controlled population. Fear of public shaming. Social fear is one of the strongest fears in human psychology. If you can make someone afraid of being an outcast, they will self-censor and stay in line. This is why governments and media control what opinions are socially acceptable. Question the wrong thing, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist. Criticize authority, you get fact-checked or banned. They don't need physical punishment anymore. They just turn society against you. Every single government, media outlet, and corporation knows this fundamental truth. A fearful person obeys orders. A fearful mind does not think critically. A fearful society never revolts. They don't need to control you directly. All they need is to make you afraid of what happens if you step out of line. And most terrifying of all, once fear takes root in the mind, it no longer needs to be enforced. People will police themselves. But what happens when an entire civilization is controlled by fear? What happens when people accept fear as normal? History has already answered this question, because fear isn't just a method of control. It is how totalitarian empires are built. And in the next act, we'll expose how fear was used to create some of the most oppressive regimes in history. What if I told you that the greatest empires, dictatorships, and regimes weren't built on military power? They were built on fear, because when people fear enough, they will obey anything. Every dictator in history understood one thing: a fearful population is easier to rule than a free one. And the blueprint of fear-based control has always been the same. Step one, manufacture a common enemy. Every dictator starts by convincing people that danger is everywhere. They create an imaginary enemy, someone to blame for every problem. The Nazis blamed the Jews. The Soviets blamed traitors of the revolution. The moment people fear a common enemy, they stop questioning their leaders, and they demand protection. Step 2. Make the leader the only solution. Once people are afraid enough, the dictator presents himself as the only one who can save them. The people don't realize they are being manipulated. Instead, they willingly give up their freedoms for protection. It is the perfect trap. Step 3. Eliminate free thought. Once fear has taken over, the next step is to silence all opposition. Books are banned. News is controlled. Schools only teach the official truth. Dissent becomes a crime. People are arrested not for actions, but for thoughts. History shows this pattern over and over again. Stalin used fear to purge his enemies. Hitler used fear to control Germany. Mao Zedong used fear to reshape China. And today, the Same tactics are being used, but in ways most people don't even notice. But how modern governments use this same strategy? Dictators used to silence people with force, but now they don't need force anymore. They use fear of losing your job, fear of social rejection, and fear of speaking the truth. Say the wrong thing, you're canceled. Don't obey the rules, you're banned, fired, or labeled an extremist. Question authority? Your speech is controlled, your access is restricted, your reputation is destroyed. Modern fear is invisible, and that makes it even more powerful. History proves that once a nation is controlled by fear, it does not realize it is being controlled at all. People think they are free, even when every aspect of their lives is dictated by unseen forces. Because the best form of slavery is the one where the slaves do not know they are slaves, and that's exactly where we are today. But the real question is, how deep does the rabbit hole go? What happens when governments stop just controlling actions and start controlling emotions, thoughts, and beliefs? Because that is where we are headed. And in the next act, we expose the next evolution of fear-based control, one that goes beyond propaganda, beyond laws, straight into the depths of the human mind. What if I told you the most powerful form of fear isn't physical, but psychological? Because while ancient rulers used swords and prisons to control people, modern rulers use something far more powerful: your own mind. Throughout history, fear has always been a tool of control, but it has changed. It had to, because physical oppression makes people fight back. But mental oppression, it makes people control themselves. Here's how fear evolved. Stage 1, the age of physical control. Ancient empires in 19th century. Obedience through violence, torture, and brute force. Fear of punishment kept the masses in check. Kings, emperors, and warlords ruled with iron fists. Stage 2, the age of social control, 20th century and early 21st century. The rise of mass media changed everything. Instead of physical force, rulers shaped public perception. Propaganda, censorship, and psychological warfare replaced whips and chains. Stage 3, the age of psychological control, today. Fear is now personalized, digitalized, and invisible. Governments no longer need to watch you. You watch yourself. Social pressure, digital surveillance, and algorithmic conditioning shape your thoughts. And the result? People don't need to be forced to comply anymore, because they are conditioned to do it voluntarily. The rulers of the past used cages and chains, but today, the chains are in your own mind. Here's how modern fear-based control works. Fear of losing your status. You are afraid of losing your job, reputation, and opportunities. You are afraid of saying the wrong thing, even if it's true. So you stay quiet, obey, and follow the script. Control through social pressure. Fear of being an outcast. Social media keeps you constantly seeking validation. You fear losing likes, followers, and approval, so you conform, even when you don't believe in something. Control through social belonging. Fear of uncertainty. Chaos is created on purpose. Financial instability, global. Crises and never-ending fear campaigns keep you anxious. When you're afraid, you look to authority for protection. Control through crisis management. The modern world is designed to keep you afraid, because a fearful population is an obedient population. When fear is external, you can fight against it. When fear is internal, you never even realize you're being controlled. And that's the final goal: to make fear feel normal, to make control feel like freedom. And once that happens, you don't need a ruler anymore, because you have become your own warden. But what happens when people start seeing through the illusion? What happens when fear stops working? Because there's one thing history proves again and again. Fear can only control people for so long, and the moment they stop being afraid, the entire system collapses. Have you ever wondered why fear is so powerful? Why it can paralyze people, make them obedient, and turn them against their own interests? Because fear isn't just an emotion, it's a weapon. And once you understand how it works, You'll never fall for it again. Fear doesn't just make people afraid, it makes them irrational. Here's what fear does to the human brain. 1. Fear shuts down critical thinking. When you are afraid, your brain switches to survival mode. You stop questioning things and look for immediate safety. This makes people easy to manipulate because scared people don't analyze, they obey. 2. Fear creates an enemy. People in fear need someone to blame. Governments and rulers always provide an enemy, real or fake. It keeps the population divided and distracted. 3. Fear makes you seek authority. When people are afraid, they look for someone to protect them. It's a natural instinct. Fear makes people give up freedom for safety. This is why crises are always followed by more government power. And the biggest secret? The people in power know this. They know that a society in fear is a society that doesn't ask questions. The rulers of the past used physical force, but today they use fear-based conditioning. Here's how. Manufactured crises, the news. Cycles are designed to keep you anxious. One crisis ends and another begins. You are kept in a constant state of panic. The economy is collapsing. A new war is starting. A new virus is coming. And when people are afraid, they don't think. They just react. The fear of judgment. People are more afraid of being judged than being wrong. Society conditions you to fear standing out, speaking up, or questioning things. This is why people self-censor, even in private. Thoughts. What will people think? I don't want to get canceled. I'd rather just go along with it. This is control without force. The illusion of safety. We are doing this for your protection. Every time a new law or rule is introduced, it's framed as for your own good. People trade their freedom for security without realizing they are losing both. The greatest power of fear, it makes people defend the system that controls them. If someone has been conditioned to live in fear, they will attack anyone who tries to wake them up because the truth is too painful. So they stay asleep. They mock the people who see through the illusion, and they police each other so the system doesn't have to. Because the best form of control? The kind where people don't even realize they are being controlled. But what happens when the fear starts losing its effect? Because history shows one simple truth. Every fear-based system eventually collapses. And when that happens, the people in power will do something drastic to maintain control. Fear is powerful, but it has one weakness. It fades. Because over time, people adapt. They stop reacting. And when fear no longer controls them, the system is forced to create a new crisis, a fear reset. But here's the real question. What happens when people stop falling for it? Fear is not random. It follows a predictable cycle. Here's how it works. Step 1. Introduce a new crisis. A sudden event happens, real or manufactured. The media pushes fear-based headlines non-stop. People panic. Step 2. Offer a solution. The people in power introduce a new law, restriction, or rule. They say, "We are doing this to protect you." People accept it, believing it's temporary. Step 3. Keep the fear alive. The crisis never fully ends. The fear becomes part of daily life. People adjust to the new level of control, and once that fear loses its grip, the cycle repeats. A new crisis, a new fear, a new rule, and more power shifted away from the people. The real reason fear must be maintained? Because if people stop fearing the system, they start questioning it. Why are we paying so many taxes? Why do we work 40+ hours a week just to survive? Why do billionaires get richer during every crisis? Why do laws always increase? Control, but never personal freedom? If people start seeing the pattern, the illusion breaks, and that is the greatest threat to those in power. Because once people realize fear was the only thing keeping them obedient, fear was the only thing stopping them from questioning, fear was the only thing making them accept a broken system, they become unstoppable. But here's where it gets interesting. When fear stops working, rulers don't just give up. They escalate, and history shows exactly what happens next. Fear is step 1. But what happens when people stop being afraid? The answer: they stop obeying. And history proves that when fear no longer works, rulers don't just step aside, they evolve, they upgrade their methods, and they move to the next phase of control. But here's the terrifying part: most people never notice the shift. Phase 2 is division and distrust. Once people stop fearing those in power, they must be turned against each other. Here's how it works. Step 1. Create artificial enemies: race versus race, rich versus poor, left versus right, men versus women. The goal? Keep people fighting each other so they never fight the system. Step 2. Flood the media with outrage. Every news cycle becomes a crisis. Social media is engineered for anger and hate. The public is too busy arguing to see what's really happening. Step 3. Introduce more control as a solution. More surveillance for your safety. More censorship to stop misinformation. More laws to protect the weak. Each new rule, law, and restriction is always framed as a necessity, and before people realize what happened, they are more controlled than ever before. Here's the harsh truth: a divided public is a weak public. If people hate each other more than they hate corruption, if people blame each other instead of the system, if people are distracted by meaningless conflicts, they will never unite against real oppression, and that is the ultimate goal. Because as long as people are emotionally manipulated into fighting, they never stop to ask the most important question: who benefits from this chaos? But there's one final step: when fear stops working, when division starts losing power, there is one last method rulers turn to, and history proves it is the most terrifying of all. If fear fails, if division doesn't work, there is one last weapon that never fails. It is the most powerful illusion ever created, and it's the reason people accept suffering, poverty, and oppression without ever fighting back. It's called hope, but not real hope, not the hope that inspires people to build, create, and change. False hope, the kind designed to keep people waiting, hoping, dreaming, but never acting. Throughout history, rulers have known one truth: a person who believes things will get better will tolerate anything, and that is the secret. People don't rebel when they are suffering, they rebel when they believe suffering will never end. That is why those in power always promise a better tomorrow. Not today, not now, tomorrow. And that tomorrow never comes. The most effective lies ever told: just work harder. Success will come. The economy is rigged, but people keep grinding. A new law will fix everything. The new law just gives rulers more power. Your government will take care of you, while the rich get richer and the people get poorer. The next election will change everything. But the system never actually changes. The point? People don't realize they're being controlled because they are too busy waiting for something that will never happen. They keep you working. They keep you hoping. They keep you chasing. And by the time you realize the truth, your life is already over. This is why most people never wake up, because false hope is more comfortable than hard truth. And rulers know this. That is why. The weak are given hope. The strong create their own future. The real question is, which one are you? What if I told you? People don't obey laws because they believe in them. They don't follow orders because they trust authority. They obey because they fear something worse, and that fear is chaos. The idea that without control, society would collapse into violence, destruction, and anarchy. But here's the question: who taught you to fear chaos? And more importantly, what if that fear is the biggest lie in history? Every government claims that without them, there would be lawlessness and destruction. Every ruler warns that if they lose power, everything will fall apart. Every system teaches people that obedience, survival. But here's what they don't tell you. Before government, before laws, before rulers, people survived just fine. Tribes governed themselves. People created their own order. Communities handled justice without massive institutions. Chaos is not the default of human nature, But if you believe it is, you will always trade freedom for security, and that's exactly what the powerful want. There is a cycle of control. Step 1, create fear. Tell people without control, there is chaos. Step 2, offer protection. Convince them only the system can save them. Step 3, demand obedience, trade freedom for security. Step 4, repeat forever. Keep people scared enough to obey, but not scared enough to rebel. This is how control never needs force. People police themselves. They silence anyone who questions authority. They beg for more rules, more restrictions, more chains, all because they fear a world without their masters. Powerful people don't fear chaos. They fear people realizing they don't need control. And once you see this, you will never obey. The same way again. What if I told you? You think you have control over your life. You believe you make your own decisions. But in reality, every choice you've ever made was already decided for you, not by force, not by laws, but by something far more powerful, the illusion of choice. You can vote, but every candidate serves the same system. You can choose your job, but every industry is owned by the same corporations. You can consume any media, but it's all controlled by a few billionaires. And here's the trick. They give you choices, so you never realize you were never free to begin with. Have you ever noticed, no matter who wins an election, the system never truly changes? No matter what career you choose, you still work most of your life away? No matter what media you consume, the narrative is always the same? This isn't an accident, it's design. The powerful never remove all choices. They just limit them to only what benefits them. How this keeps you under control. Step 1, create fake choices. Give people options, but only within controlled boundaries. Step 2, make them feel free. Convince them they are choosing so they don't resist. Step 3, keep them distracted. Let them fight over which option is better, while ignoring that both serve the same masters. Step 4, repeat forever. Make them believe this is just how the world works, and just like that, control exists without chains. Because when people believe they are free, they never try to escape. The most powerful prison is the one where the prisoner doesn't even know he's trapped. What if I told you your fear, your guilt, your hope, they don't belong to you. They were planted inside your mind, not for your benefit, not to protect you, but to control you. Because when the powerful can control your emotions, they can control you. How they weaponize fear. Fear keeps you obedient. Governments, media, and corporations manufacture fear to make you easy to manipulate. Fear of war, fear of economic collapse, fear of disease, fear of rejection. The result? You beg them for protection, and in return, they take more of your freedom. Fear is the easiest way to enslave people. And the worst part? When you're afraid, you stop thinking critically. You react instead of question. You obey instead of resist. And that's exactly what they want. If fear doesn't work, they use guilt. Guilt makes you weak. When you feel guilty, you don't fight back. You self-punish. You accept oppression. You have privilege. You should feel bad. You owe us obedience for the greater good. If you resist, you're selfish. Fi, goal? To make you ashamed of your own power, because a guilty person never rebels. Fear keeps you weak. Guilt keeps you silent. But what keeps you trapped forever? Hope, the most dangerous weapon of all. Work hard and you'll be free. One day, things will get better. Trust the system. It will reward you eventually. But here's the truth. False hope keeps you waiting instead of fighting. Your emotions are not yours. They were engineered to keep you in place. What if I told you your thoughts are not yours? Your beliefs, planted inside you, your opinions, designed for you. And the most terrifying part? You don't even realize it's happening because the most powerful control isn't physical, it's mental. From the moment you were born, your parents programmed you. Your school conditioned you. The media shaped your worldview. Society told you what is right and wrong, and you never questioned it. Because they never taught you how. They told you what to think, but never how to think. This is what smart people believe. This is what good people believe. This is the only acceptable truth. And if you disagree, you're ridiculed, you're attacked, you're outcasted. So most people do what? They conform, not because they believe it, but because they fear being rejected. If everyone believes something, you assume it must be true. That's why they control the media. That's why they control the education system. That's why they control the internet, because if they control what you hear the most, they control what you believe. And the scariest part? Most people never escape this trap. The final truth: you think you're free, but your mind has been hijacked. If you have been manipulated your entire life, how do you break free? How do you take back control of your mind? How do you unlearn everything they programmed into you? The answer is terrifying. Because waking up hurts. But what's the solution to this control? Step 1. Question everything. Every thought you have. Pause. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Who benefits from me thinking this way? Where did I learn this idea? If the answer is, I heard it on the news, everyone believes this, that's just how things are, then congratulations. You've found a programmed belief. Now destroy it. Step 2. Detox from mental programming. You can't think clearly if your mind is full of noise. So start cutting off the poison. Mainstream media, designed to control emotions. Social media addiction, designed to keep you distracted. Junk entertainment, designed to make you weak. For the first time in your life, sit in silence. Be alone with your own thoughts. Discover what your mind actually thinks without external influence, and it will terrify you because you'll realize you have no idea who you really are. Step 3. Think for yourself, truly. Now you rebuild. Read books from thinkers who challenge your worldview. Listen to people who don't think like you. Learn how to argue against your own beliefs. Find your own truth, not the one handed to you. Only then do you become free. Breaking free is painful. That's why most people never do it. They choose comfort over truth. They choose distraction over awareness. They choose obedience over freedom. And that's why most people remain prisoners. But you are waking up. If you truly break free from the system, what happens next? What does life look like when no one controls you? What is the ultimate consequence of waking up? Most people never reach this stage, because once you're awake, you can never go back. Basically, there are 3 stages of true freedom. The collapse of illusions. You will lose the world you once knew. The lies that comforted you shatter. The systems you trusted exposed. The people you thought were awake revealed as blind followers. This is why most people fear waking up. Because ignorance, it's easy. Truth, it's brutal. And the moment you wake up, you can never go back to sleep. The isolation phase. You will feel alone because the world is still asleep. You'll see manipulation everywhere. You'll struggle to relate to normal conversations. You'll realize most people don't want to be free. But then, something changes, because instead of needing validation, instead of needing approval, you will become self-sufficient. You will find power within yourself, and that's when everything shifts. The rise of power. You will become dangerous, because now, no one can manipulate you, no one can trap you in false fears, no one can sell you fake happiness. You think for yourself, you act on your own will, you create your own reality, and that terrifies the system, because what happens when people are no longer afraid? What happens when people wake up and take control? They become unstoppable. When you break free, you don't fit in anymore, but that's the price of real freedom. That's the price of controlling your own mind. Most people, they never escape. They live and die as obedient slaves. But you're different, because you are finally awake. And now, the only question left is, what will you do with your freedom?